Hello, Perfume Internet, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to be discussing how to start perfumery as cheaply as possible. Now, is perfumery ever going to be a cheap hobby? No. This is still going to be a pretty expensive hobby, but this is how to get started as cheaply as possible so that you can find out whether or not this is worth blowing your entire savings on. And if you're wondering during this video why I'm flailing around my microphone as if it's not doing anything, it's because it's not. I bought this microphone so I could cheaply start my YouTube channel, and it is of worse quality than my headphone microphone, so that is what I'm actually using. This is a prop. So let's establish our shopping list really quick so that we know what we're going to buy. The number one thing that you need to start perfumery, of course, is aroma chemicals. The first aroma chemical order is very daunting, and there are a couple of different methods for deciding which aroma chemicals you should buy, and I will discuss them later in the video, but obviously we're going to need a little bit of aroma chemicals. Number two, the second most important thing in this entire list is a scale. Okay? You might have read some bogus, dubious AI articles about how actually perfumers measure everything in drops, but that's not the case. You have to measure by weight. That is the only way. There's no other way. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Now, there are very specific metrics for which scales you need to buy, okay? I will get to that later in the video, but just so you know, do not check out on Amazon quite yet. The next most important thing that we need to have are miscellaneous lab equipment, pipettes, beakers, gloves, eye protection. Depending on whether you wear glasses or not, you might not need to buy the eye protection, but personally, I like to use the lab goggles or whatever, eye protection thingies because aroma chemicals can melt certain types of plastic and my frames are plastic, so I'll get more into the wonderful world of having your plastic melted by aroma chemicals later in the video. Fourthly, we're going to need some dilutants. Even if you work neat in general, you're still going to need to dilute some aroma chemicals. There are some aroma chemicals, even in the beginner world, that do need to be diluted. I personally work diluted in my formulations. That's why I have so many of those little amber glass bottles on my desk. So you're gonna need some DPG or IPM, Herculan D, alcohol, depending on, the specific aroma chemicals you're buying, and what you plan to dilute in later in the process. If you're making oil-based perfumes, you probably want to use DPG, something like that, for example. Once again, the type of alcohol you need is very specific. Do not check out on Amazon yet. We will be getting into that later. In addition to dilutants, you're also going to need some bottles to either put your diluted aroma chemicals or some finished formulas into. Now, those bottles don't need to be amber glass bottles like the ones that I use, especially if you're going to be storing them in a dark space, or if you live in Washington like I do, and it's always dark anyway. While you don't need amber glass, you do need polycone caps, and I will explain later in the video what those are and why they're important. Next off is scent strips. Scent strips are very important for doing your aroma chemical studies and also for testing out your new formulations because you're going to want to do some blends, okay? And what are you going to test that on? Little pieces of paper, right? Personally, I find that the specific weight of paper that typically is used in scent strips is much better than paper that's like this. The last thing you're going to need is my free, 100% free Introduction to Perfumery guide, in which I tell you exactly how to start perfumery from scratch. And I go over techniques on how to calculate IFRA, how to do your blends, how to do your scent studies, different suppliers to use, different discords you can join, all of that stuff, okay? Very important you download my guide. It's 100% free. And also, if you don't like to read, make sure to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel specifically. Now, I used to recommend people buy a hot plate in order to liquefy some of their solidified chemicals like resins or crystalline chemicals that come in bottles, but I no longer do that because I have been enlightened by the gospel of hot rice. Now, hot plates are useful when you have your final formulation in a big old beaker and you just need to incorporate the crystalline materials that you've put into it. But when you're just starting out, you're not making big formulations or anything like that, and you just need to dilute your chemicals or work with solid materials, hot rice is really the only thing that you need. Get a glass bowl. I recommend glass because the rice can get very hot and it will melt the plastic, and it's happened to me several times. A glass bowl with rice, put it in the microwave for a couple minutes. It's gonna be hot as hell, and then put your aroma chemicals in here. It's actually a lot more gentle on your aroma chemicals than putting them on a hot plate, and it's a lot easier than doing a bain marie. Okay? So, hot rice is all you need. By the way, it's not cooked. Okay, don't cook the rice first. It will grow mold. All right, so now that we've got our shopping list established, let's go over some techniques on how to buy everything that I just listed. Okay? I'm going to start with the scale. As you guys know, because I said it before, there's a very specific kind of scale that you need to get, and that is a 100 gram to 0.001 gram jewelry scale. Okay, now that's not like the scale that you need for the rest of your journey, but it's the cheapest kind of scale you can get, and it's not exactly super accurate, but it's accurate enough. Okay? If you can afford a 200 gram to 0.001 gram scale, go ahead. Um, if you can afford something like this, that's even better. I personally got that scale that you see behind me on my desk on eBay for $60. Now, that's kind of expensive for starting out with perfumery when you don't know if you're going to need any of this later on in life, but it's a very, very good scale. It's accurate. What I want you guys to know is that you can get very cheap lab equipment from lab liquidation sales on eBay and probably other platforms, but I use eBay. I got that scale behind me for $60. It's a 200 or yeah, I think it's 200 to 0.001 scale, and it's much more accurate than a jewelry scale. As you can see, it's got the plastic barrier around it to protect from the wind and all of that stuff. When research projects, etc., end, they have to get rid of stuff like beakers, glassware, scales, hot plates, all of the things that you're gonna want in your perfumery journey, and they have to get rid of them quick and cheap. I've gotten glassware, scales, my hot plate, everything from lab liquidation scales. I've even gotten aroma chemicals from them. I once got like 500 grams of methylanthanolate for 20 bucks with shipping included. Now, if you really just want to get a cheap jewelry scale on Amazon and pay the $20 for it, I honestly wouldn't recommend buying those tiny jewelry scales secondhand because they're barely functional firsthand. But if you want something like that, definitely eBay. Now, the next thing we will be talking about are pipettes and beakers, and this is probably a good time to mention the whole plastic melting thing. As you might be able to see back there, my windshield looks kind of dirty and foggy. That's because the windshield is not made of chemical resistant plastic, and it has melted. Not melted to the point where there are holes in it, but melted to the point where there are just kind of like small defects in the plastic, okay? And that's gonna happen. I'm gonna have to replace the windshield eventually. But the reason I mention it is because there are two different types of pipettes and beakers, plastic and glass. And you can use either, but there is a very shitty trend on Amazon of sellers selling things that are basically useless, and they won't tell you that they're basically useless. You have to check. So make sure that if you buy the plastic pipettes and beakers, you are buying HDPE or another type of chemical resistant plastic. Sometimes they'll be like, oh, well, these pipettes are for feeding water to baby birds. They don't need to be chemical resistant. Why did you expect that? Okay, so check to make sure that it's chemical resistant. Don't waste your money, don't waste your time. But you could also buy glass pipettes and beakers, which is what I use. Now, in my aforementioned Intro to Perfumery guide, I go in detail of the pros and cons between plastic and glass. Mainly, the pros of glass are that they can be reused over and over again. Overall, over time, it's cheaper to use glass if you are using it a lot. If you're using plastic pipettes and beakers a lot, you're going to have to get rid of them pretty quickly. You're gonna have to throw them away all the time. Eventually, that cost is gonna add up. But obviously, for this as cheap as possible video, I would recommend plastic, especially if you're not sure if this hobby is for you. But if you are pretty dang sure this hobby is for you, you might want to invest in some glass pipettes and beakers. The only downside to glass pipettes and beakers is that you have to clean them. I also go over in detail how to clean your glass pipettes in the Intro to Perfumery guide. It's really not that difficult. Now, lastly, in this section, we're going to talk about gloves and eye protection. There's not really a specific type of glove or eye protection that you need in order to do perfumery. Whatever gloves you can get that fit your hands and will protect you against, mild chemical contamination, latex or other is fine. And eye protection, just plastic. It doesn't have to be chemical resistant, to be honest, because the amount of times your eyes are going to come into contact with aroma chemicals is low, and if you need to buy new ones, it's not that expensive. We're not working with glass flying at your face at 1,000 miles an hour, so it's fine. Definitely wouldn't use your prescription glasses though, because as I said, they can melt the plastic in your frames, and prescription glasses are much more expensive than lab goggles. So now for our section on dilutants. I personally use alcohol in pretty much everything. However, if you're going to be making oil-based perfumes, you don't want to dilute anything in alcohol because that kind of ruins the whole point, doesn't it? In that case, DPG is the definite choice for alternative dilutants in perfumery. If you ever buy a formula online, which we will get into in the aroma chemical section, you will notice that a lot of perfumery formulas, if not all of the ones that you'll buy online, have DPG in them as a solvent. A lot of perfumers will just add it to normalize their formulas and make everything an even 1,000 grams. Now, if you want to dilute in oil, I recommend something like jojoba, scentless oil that's relatively cheap to use and skin safe. If you're diluting in alcohol, and this is extremely important, okay? Listen. I have seen this so many times. Don't let me catch you doing it. There is only two types of alcohol you can use in perfumery. There are only two. There are no others. Undenatured alcohol, okay? The type that you drink, Everclear. And you're gonna want that to be high proof alcohol, not just your regular run of the mill vodka, because the water content, you don't want too much water in your perfumes. It makes them prone to spoiling, makes them prone to mold. You want a high proof alcohol. Water can also create solubility problems in your fragrances because there are multiple things that don't really solubilize in water. If the water content is too high, your perfumes are going to be kind of murky and cloudy and possibly have solubility issues. I wouldn't even recommend you buy 200 proof alcohol unless that's the only thing you can get a hand on, because 200 proof is usually way more expensive than everything else, and over time it becomes like around 190 proof anyway because alcohol wants a little bit of water. Now, as for denatured alcohol, there's only one kind you can buy. There's only one kind. And I recognize that in some countries it can be hard to get a hold of this specific type of alcohol, which is why I said you can also get undenatured alcohol. There's only one kind of denatured alcohol you can use. SD40B is what it's called, and that is a specific type of denatured alcohol for use in cosmetics. Perfumes are cosmetics. Uh, it contains tert butyl alcohol and Bitrex. Those are the denaturants. I have seen people buy just generally denatured alcohol, not knowing that there's a difference between all of the different types, and their denatured alcohol will have methanol in it. All right, bottles. For bottles, there isn't a specific size of bottle or a specific coating on the bottle. It doesn't even really need to be amberglass as long as you keep it in a dark place, like I said, but it does need to be a polycone cap bottle. It doesn't matter how thick your aroma chemicals are, most of them will have the potential to evaporate through any other type of bottle. Don't use the bottles with built-in droppers. Don't use bottles that don't have any sort of seal on them. Use the polycone cap bottles. I will show you what that looks like. This is a polycone capped amber glass bottle. This is what the polycone cap looks like. That thing is what keeps it from leaking or, evaporating out of the bottle. It might look like this bottle is airtight, but it's not. Well, this one is. But in general, if you're buying bottles that don't have any kind of seal like that, it's not as tight as you think it is. Lastly, the part that you've all been waiting for, how to make your first aroma chemical order. Now, technically, there's no minimum amount of aroma chemicals you need to buy. You could start with 1, you could start with 2, you could start with 10, okay? You don't need to buy an entire collection of aroma chemicals right away if you can't afford it or if you're not sure this hobby is for you, right? There are 2 methods that I recommend people go about making their first aroma chemical order. Method number 1, you buy a pre-made kit. Perfumer's Apprentice sells them, Freighter Works sells them, a bunch of perfumery supply houses sell them. I have a complete list of recommended suppliers in my perfumery guide. That is 100% free, by the way. As for the quality of the list of chemicals that exist in these kits, they're all okay. You're not going to go wrong buying any of them. This is all just to get your feet wet in the industry. You're not going to make a professional perfume right away. You're not going to have all of the chemicals that you need to make a full perfume right away. That's just not going to happen. So don't even put pressure on yourself to have that. It's really all about cost and value. If you like the chemicals in a certain kit, you feel like it's a good price compared to the other ones, buy that. If you have extra time on your hands, it could be cheaper or expeditious of you to buy all of the chemicals separately because some of them are just more expensive in the kit. But I think that the lists that come with the kits that are published online are a good place to start. The other method is to find a formula online that you like. You could buy the formula. Freighter Works, Creative Formula sells them. There's also the Perfumery Formula subreddit if you're looking for a specific one, and then just buy all of the aroma chemicals you need to make that specific fragrance and study them. And this might seem like kind of a weird starting point for a lot of people because you're just kind of like buying something for a very specific project. But I find that a lot of people are really motivated by their ability to create something good right away. And I especially was kind of like that. I didn't use either of these methods to make my first chemical order. Full transparency. I looked at these lists. I made a little list of the chemicals that I thought I would want to buy. And then I bought some other chemicals that I was interested, especially ones relating to the fruity chemicals, because I really wanted to make fruity perfumes, and a lot of these lists had very few fruity chemicals in them. You can feel free to customize all of this stuff. It really depends on your learning style. Do you think that it would help you to study the basics first, while not necessarily having all of the tools to make a full fragrance? Or do you think it would help you to have the tools to make a fully formed fragrance right away so you can see the development process and some suggestions about ratios for these specific chemicals? I think both methods are valid. And of course, you could take a look at these lists or formulas and just buy a couple of the chemicals you see on there just to smell and play around with. You don't need to get a whole kit. There's no minimum amount of chemicals that you need in order to start your perfumery journey. Really quickly, I am going to go through this list of things, find the cheapest stuff in the categories, and put it right here. as an estimate for how much you're going to spend on everything. Now, when I did this video for my TikTok about a few months ago, I came up with a number about $300. But as we know, the economy is ever changing right now and prices are just kind of fluctuating like crazy. Let's see how we did. If you have any questions about perfumery topics you would like me to cover in the future, or any questions about this video, make sure to ask me in the comments, and like and subscribe and smash that follow button or whatever.